Yeah, so let's all turn on our videos now. We're recording.
Hi everyone. Yeah, trust you are doing great today. Welcome, 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 welcome. Yes, it's our first workshop for the year, and we are super excited to have everyone on this call today. Uh, my name is Kingsley, and I'll be your host today. I'll not be doing this alone. I also have my co-host Ozichi joining us for this hosting today. Please feel free to drop where you're connecting from on the chat box, wherever you are. Feel free to please drop the chat. Let's see. Want to know where you're connecting from. We're happy to join you all today. Welcome again. Yeah, straight to what we'll be doing today. Yes, today we are going to be learning about business organization and compliance. Yes, that's what we're going to be talking about. Very, very interesting topic. And I want to guarantee you that this is going to be a very good use of your time today. You can bet that at the end of the session. All right. Agenda today, just to give you a brief shot of the agenda today, we'll take a deep dive into business compliance and organization. Then afterwards, we'll go into question and answers. So for your questions, as our speakers are speaking and you feel you want to ask a question, please feel free to drop those questions on the chat box. Our team is definitely going to pick it. And when we get to the session, we'll handle that. Then lastly, we'll talk about conclusions and toolkit. So there's a gift for everyone. Please make sure you stay to the end because that's when we're going to be giving you a gift with love from Race today. All right, next will be I'm so honored to have this seasoned speakers today. We are honored at Race. Um, we brought in experts in their various fields, and I'm not going to say anything about them. I would allow them to please introduce themselves. I would want to hand over to Lerato. I'm still in the season of International Women's Day. She's one of the women doing great stuffs out there in the world. So Lerato, please over to you. Then afterwards, Adesoji and Emmanuel. All right, that's my time.
Thank you, Kingsley. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Laraton Kabinde. I am the CFO of Chanson International. I'm a chartered accountant by qualification, but I'd like to call myself a master of all trades. I've got experience in startups from the beginning to end, even though I'm an accountant. So I've got a wide range of experience in starting businesses, compliance, operational finance, legal sometimes, which is why I will be here today and will be digging deeper into that. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you
should
so much.
I go ahead? Okay, hi
Yes,
everyone.
please go
My
ahead.
name is My name is Soji Shalanka. I'm with Renaissance Capital. We're an emerging and frontier markets focused investment bank. I sit in our London office, but we also have offices in Africa, so in Nigeria and Kenya specifically. So I mean, I think for me, my career has always been on the public markets side of things, but we also spend a lot of time looking at things in private markets, particularly within financial services. And when I say financial services, also fintech. So we cover listed fintech. And we also do a bunch of research on private fintech companies. And what I do for the firm is research on listed and private banks and fintech companies. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion and hopefully your questions at the end. Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Emmanuel Haza. I work with Flutterwave and I lead their shared services team. And shared services, the team is responsible for merchant onboarding, KYC review, acquiring partners, relationship management. Before now, I'd worked in Zenith Bank for over 10 years. In 2021, I left Zenith Bank. I went to a startup where I was the chief operating officer. After about 2 months, I left, went to OP. I was there for a month and a half. And then in August 2021, I finally joined Flutterwave. My experience has always been in e-payments, which spans from settlement, reconciliation, compliance, and legal. I'm happy to be here today. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you, Lerato. Thank you, Adesoji. I can bet that we're in best hands today to do justice to our topic today, business organization and compliance. All right, to the next slide. I would like to hand over to my co-host at this point, Ozichi, who will take us into the next session. Ozi, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Kingsley. Like the rest of the speakers have said, it's actually so exciting to be here. I've actually quite been looking forward to this event, and I'm happy that we're finally doing this. I'm happy that we're here today having this conversation. So, without further ado, I think we can dig into it. Before I forget, my name is Ozi. I'm the sales engineer and B2C lead at Raise. Basically, I will be having the chit chat conversation with the speakers today. And my first conversation is actually going to start with Lerato. So, Lerato, hi, nice to meet you. Hi. Yes, you're looking great. I think my very first question to you at this point is on, as we all know, the topic of conversation for the day, which is business compliance and organization, right? So, with this topic, it's quite interesting because I know that quite a number of businesses struggle in this area and is actually often overlooked. So, just so we can support our viewers and those tuning in, listening to this, and those who will be listening to this later on, what would you say are the requirements for laying a solid foundation for business success based on your experience?
Thank you, Ozzy. So I suppose when you're starting a business, we all want to succeed, right? So success is on top of your mind. And you've gotten funds. First thing, somebody invests in you, could be yourself, could be your family. And now you have to operate. The most important thing is that you have to manage your risk or mitigate your risk, which is your operational risk, your financial risk, your reputational risk. So what you need are people or team members that help you mitigate those risks so that you can succeed. So if you're thinking about your operational risk, who would I need to ensure that? I obviously need somebody who is very well knowledgeable on the compliance side of things, your legal requirements, your regulatory bodies, who do I report to, who regulates the industry, the environment, and everything else, or the product actually, or the service that I'm going to be offering to my people. So you need somebody who is quite well known in your legal landscape, so your compliance person. Then you need somebody who is quite knowledgeable or has experience in operational finance, not just somebody who's got experience in technical finance, but somebody with operational finance, somebody who's going to help you set up your financial systems, help you ensure that you have enough funds or liquidity or solvency to carry on, and ensure that you can obviously report to your stakeholders. The other person that you're going to need is somebody who's going to mitigate your reputational risk. That will be maybe your CEO, a business development manager. That one would be responsible for your stakeholder management. They're the ones that will ensure that there is alliance between you and your stakeholders in any shape or form. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for that intro. Great way to start. So I think you've actually pretty much touched on my next question. Yes, I don't know if everyone else can see. Abel, could you move to the next screen? So for the next question that I have for you is still on the requirements of laying a solid foundation. So now I heard you say something about um, financial professionals that you're hiring, like the top three people. So like I mean, I know that sometimes startups when they begin, they have like teams of about what, 6 people, 4 people. There are even companies that have functioned for a long time with about 5 people in their team. So could you just like walk us through, like, who you would say are the most important members of such a strong team, especially considering the fact that companies in this position do not always have enough funds to hire all the talent that they need. So, in order to build a strong foundation at these initial stages, who would you say are the most important people that they need to hire at this point in time?
So let's look at the three people. I will just speak about people not necessarily in finance. Let's start with your compliance officer, because irrespective of how much money you have or how great your product is and how many customers you have, if you do not meet the legal or operational requirements that are necessary, you've got an operational risk. You cannot be able to operate for the next few whatever. That will be the end of your business if you don't meet the legal requirements or the statutory requirements, whatever it is. So you need somebody who will ensure that you are compliant with the regulatory bodies, compliant with whatever your financing requirements is, like whatever your funders is, and everything else that requires that you be compliant with. So that is the most important person, well, among the other people. Then you obviously would need somebody who is your stakeholder engagement, who's responsible for your stakeholder engagement. Your stakeholder engagement obviously being your funders, your customers, your suppliers, everyone. That person is needed, and they're the ones that ensures that all the requirements that these stakeholders have, you guys are addressing in the business. And then you need your finance person. I always emphasize somebody with technical finance skills and operational finance, because they're the ones that are going to implement the financial processes in your business. And they're the ones who are going to know what financial compliance you need to meet with. They're also the ones that are going to help you mitigate the risk of fraud in your business, because that is actually quite important.
Very, very important. Way to go, Lorato. I feel even smarter right now. I feel like I'm ready to start a multinational business at this point. Thank you so much for this insight. So I think the last thing, because with everything you've shared about, like, tips on the best people to hire at this point in time, I think now we can now the conversation is moving forward, right? So now thinking about business processes, still on Lorato's question, now thinking about business processes, what would you say are the best processes that we can put in place? So let's say we've already brought in, like, the financial professionals, and we have a great CFO, we have a great technical lead, and everything. Like, the team is working quite well. So what processes should we begin to establish at this point in time that we will consider to be reliable based on your experience?
I'm sure my team in every startup is tired of hearing me say delegation of authority, which is your the first document that you should have in every company for me is your delegation of authority. And that tells you every single process and steps that needs to be followed in every area of your business. Who does the procurement and what processes needs to be followed when you're doing the procurement, when you're doing the payments, when you're signing contracts, when you're engaging with stakeholders. That for me will be the first step. You can call it any other word you want to, but the one I use frequently is delegation of authority. So that's the first process. Systems, your IT systems. And your IT systems is not just if I've got a laptop that works, it's one that is integrated with all of your compliance that is required, irrespective of which environment you're in and which country you're in. It must be a system that is able to figure out or integrate the compliance requirement for that country. So that's the other thing that I will do. Sorry, I forgot to mention IT people, but I'm sure the compliance person will have to. So
That's
those are
okay.
the business processes. So your IT process, your procurement process, but your delegation of authority actually is the umbrella for every single process that you have and your financial processes.
Amazing, amazing. It sounds so good. Like I'm taking notes. I'm starting my multinational after this workshop. Thank you so much, Lorato. It's been so great hearing you speak. So questions are already coming in. So keep your questions. Thank you for asking them. We're going to treat them towards the end of this session today. So don't go away. Just stay tuned. We'll be taking your questions. So now we're still moving forward with our conversation. And now I'm going to be chatting with our next speaker, who is Mr. Adesoji Sholanke. So my question to you, Adesoji, now is on due diligence for business growth. Now, Larita has told us a bit about, the team, the kind of team we're meant to have, the processes we need to put in place. So now thinking about business growth. So let's say I started my business 2 years ago. I have a great team. I've been able to hire 6 people. And so far with all business is going well, we're making a bit of money. We're not Facebook, but we're making money here and there. So now I'm thinking about due diligence for the growth of my business. Soji, what would you say? What would you say I need to do at this point in time in terms of due diligence for business growth? What is it all about, and what would you suggest that I do? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having me, Ozzy, and the team. So I would say because the segment of the market where we operate tends to be bigger listed companies, but I think there are certain principles that guide how we think about listed businesses that I think are very useful, even when you're thinking about private companies. Because at the end of the day, every public company at some point was a private business before it became a listed company. So one of the things, for example, is if you're operating in any markets in Africa, one of the obvious things you need to pay attention to is the macroeconomic dynamics, right? So there are typical metrics such as what's going on with inflation, the exchange rate, GDP, the population, and the relative growth rates of all of these metrics. And why are these things important? So let me try and address a couple of them. So inflation, for example, it's important because of the implications on your consumer wallet, right? So is that likely to shrink or expand? So if, for example, you're selling a product that consumers can easily trade off for something else simply because the cost of goods are increasing, right? So for basic things like food, electricity, which they can't afford not to pay for, then there's question mark for you to think about there in terms of the potential growth rate of your business going forward, and also the implications for your margins. The other thing is around exchange rates. Why exchange rates important to understand? Because many of you businesses that are probably listening, many of you are raising money in dollars, but you're generating local currency revenues. Okay, so this is an important thing to always think about as well, because all your investors are measuring or expecting their returns in dollar terms. Okay, but if the currency in your local market continues to depreciate, you need to really start to think about what you can do there. There's a couple of other things I mentioned, like GDP, population, and the relative growth rates, because this serve as an indicator of the potential addressable market, okay, and whether there's really a future that you're building for. If you look at many Eastern European countries or even developed markets like Japan, their population base is actually shrinking, which means over the next 20, 30 years, right, these countries will be smaller in terms of the people that are available to serve in those countries versus today. So if you're a business in those markets, you really have a fundamental problem, right? Unlike in many African markets where population growth is still, 2, 3, 4%, right? So, important dynamics on the macro side. What else can I mention here? I think some things also think about would be market dynamics and the total addressable market. So how big is the opportunity? What are the trends that you're observing in the market? Think about the question, for example, why did Paystack and Flutterwave, what did they observe when they started in 2015, 2016, before they launched their operations, right? So the other things to also think about would be things like what's going on with competition, right? So if your business has listed comparables, it's always good to understand how those bigger companies are faring. What exactly are they discussing on their conference calls? Okay, because on conference calls, management is always discussing the most important things with very intelligent analysts that really understand the nitty-gritty of the business. So the advantage of listening to conference calls as a founder is you also start to understand what are the metrics I should be paying attention to, okay, for a business, right? So there's an app that I use, which you can easily get for free off Apple Store, and it's simply called Earnings Calls, right? And you can find call recordings for almost any listed company in developed markets. So find a business that is similar to you, listen to their conference calls. I enjoy listening to these conference calls either when I'm cooking or when I'm in the gym, and it really helps to expand my understanding of what's really important for different types of businesses. Then the final thing to maybe just flag here is just around product metrics, which many of you probably know about. So things like customer acquisition costs, lifetime value, churn rates, retention rates, burn rates, etc., etc., monthly recurring revenues, customer acquisition costs, all of those things. I mean, these are very basic things that every startup should really understand and pay attention to, because whenever you sit in front of any sort of serious company, you really need to be able to explain how your businesses are faring. Okay. I wouldn't really talk about financial and valuation metrics, but that's always important as well. And I think why financial and valuation metrics are important is because for depending on your industry, the metrics you pay attention to would always vary. Okay, so this holds true whether you're a startup or you're a big listed company. Okay, so understanding what's really important for your industry and segment is also very important to know. I hope that gave some color, Uzi.
Yes, it really did. Thank you so much. Like, this is so insightful, Disoji. I feel like I've attended a mini financial masterclass. So someone has just asked, what's the app called again? Could you just say the name of the app? Because I even need it.
Sure, sure. It's called Earnings Calls. So EARNINGS calls, CALLS. That's what it's called. Yeah.
Earnings calls. Great. Thank you so much, Soji. So my next question for you, Soji, we're still on you. Like, I have a few more questions for you. My next question is now. So based on everything you've said, like assuming that we've taken note on all the things we need to be looking out for, especially these conversations, and like thinking about what our competitors are doing, what they're measuring, and all of that. What data would you now say it informs the best practices for success? And so I know you've touched on this a little bit, but now as a first time thinking of me as a first time founder, because remember I'm saying that I'm starting my multinational company after this call today, right? So thinking of me as a fresh business owner, what would you say? What data would you tell me to collect first? Like talking to me like a 10-year-old.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So let me give an example that is maybe, I'm trying to think of which ones. So there's two I could probably draw on. So, okay, let me give you an example. So there's a company that I'm aware of. I mean, this is a company that started off doing, it's a card issuing platform. So when I say card issuing platform, the idea is that any African startup can basically use them if you want to be able to issue debit cards to your customers, debit or prepaid cards to your customers. That's basically what this platform enables. Okay, that's a simple business. If you're the founder of this business, what's utmostly important to you? The most important thing to you is you need to grow your total process volumes, right? The second thing is you need to have very strong understanding of your take rates, because how does that business make money? It takes a percentage of the payment volumes that passes through the platform. All right. So when that founder is really trying to build, the questions they are trying to understand from day one is, how can I grow my process volumes, right? Where can I get the volumes from? Okay, so this business was meant to be focusing on startups. So which markets have the most startups to focus on, right? This is an easy data to find. There's a lot of resources out there nowadays in terms of which markets are raising the most funding. Okay, so that's one easy way to really start to segment the African market, which has 50 plus countries. Okay, so with that database, you can start to prioritize where you want to focus on. So naturally, Nigeria will come up there, Egypt will show up, Kenya will show up, South Africa will show up. I mean, those are 4 initial markets to start to target. The second thing you want to start to say is, okay, because that business is resided in some African markets, trying to serve businesses in many African markets, you really want to make sure that you're focusing on markets where internet penetration the quality of internet is good, right? So that's another area you need to start to use data to try to help you segment, right? Because if you're trying to serve a market where internet either isn't available or it's too expensive, it might be really difficult for you to be able to serve those businesses remotely, Okay, because this is what this company was trying to do. And maybe the final thing to say here is that, for that company, because TPV and take rates are the most important, this company, for example, has recently, I was reading their investor update yesterday. They recently had to try and figure out a way to pivot. Well, maybe not pivot, but beyond focusing on just startups using them for card issuing, they're now trying to find alternative ways to grow TPV, right? So one of the examples that we're trying to do now is, to go into lending, for example, right? And the idea behind lending is you lend such that those customers have a credit card, right? So you're lending to the card, so the money, it's a prepaid card, so the money goes to the card and they can use that card to go and pay for things all over the place. Why would this make sense for the business? It's a TPV, it's trying to optimize for TPV, right? So what the more people have their cards to use, okay, the more total process volumes is growing on the platform, and the more take rates the business is able to generate, right? So for that business, like I said, you've been able to understand from day one what's most important. It's TPV and take rates, and everything else you're trying to do is to optimize for that. Okay, how do I grow TPV? How do I optimize my take rates? Because the initial business model was a take business, right? The new ventures is trying to do now, it can capture a higher percentage of the take rates versus previously. So that helps to expand margins. Okay, so yeah, so so that's just an example of a simple business that that I've looked at more recently that might be useful to someone in the audience.
It definitely has been very useful. Thank you so much, Saji. I really like the company, the example you use, because actually card distribution companies, they're pretty much a lot of them in Nigeria, especially thinking about the African market and the kind of data you need to be looking at, especially in relation to the business sector you belong to. So I think Soji has shared so much with us. Really, I'm so happy that we've been able to cover so much. I feel like I've been saying before, I feel wiser. But we'll still be able to come back again, because I'm sure that there might be questions around the business due diligence and all of that. So now we'll just move a bit further down in the conversation, and this time where I'm going to be talking to my colleague at Raise, Fane. Fane is actually, I'm going to give her time to introduce herself. Let me not speak for her. So over to you, Fane. So just introduce yourself and then I'll ask my question.
Okay, thank you, Ozzy. Hi, everyone. My name is Fane Kemuma. I'm the onboarding lead at Raise. I'm with a background in legal. So currently work together with Ozzy and our customer success team to make sure that our customers' needs are effectively met. Off to you,
Nice.
Ozzy.
Okay, yeah, sure. So Fane, like the slides, the slides have already given away my question, but I wanted to ask you now with based on what Lerato has said about the first things you need to do when you're building a business, right? Laying that good foundation and everything Soji told us about, like based on from an operational aspect of things. Let's say, for instance, I've been able to collect all the data Soji's been talking about. I've been taking note of how my business operations are going. I've taken into consideration that the type of data that I'm receiving, and I've also established structures. What would you say, or why then would you tell me that I need to automate my company data? Like, why is it important for me to automate it and organize it? Yeah, just take us through that, and so that our audience can have a better understanding of that.
Thank you, Ozzy. So following up on the discussion, first off, we have different kinds of data all over a company. So first thing, you might have your sales data, inbound marketing, manufacturing, etc. So all of this needs to be organized so that you can be able to easily track them, easily make decisions within your company, and also be able to see your company trajectory. Are there any loopholes that you're foreseeing that are happening right now, and how effectively can you mitigate them, as Lerato had shared earlier before? So I think that's one of the needs of why you need to collect your data. Secondly, it's also to give you that insight of who exactly, what kind of talent do I need to help me organize and clean my data? Because it's not only starting a company and then making sure, like how we used to do traditionally, having files put up together in a file storage room. it's going to be very, very disorganized. I was once there working on the files, but now that you need to automate it, because no longer are we using those file storage rooms. We are now using softwares to clean and store them and collect this data in an organized fashion currently. I hope that answered your question, Ozzy.
Oh, am I muted? Sorry. Yes, it did to an extent, although I think I would just need to just ask a bit more question in relation to that data being automated, right? So in terms of automating the data, because the thing is, some people would say some people store their data in, like, manual documents like spreadsheets and all of that. Now we're talking, I mean, we already know we're in 2023 where almost everything is automated, right? We even have bots engaging in conversations with us right now. So why then, why then do I need to automate my data? Like, I think it might be good for our audience to be able to understand why that's important at this time. Yeah.
Okay. So the importance of automating it is basically, we're currently in a very tech forward world right now. So that means the ease of using automation of data. So not only using one software, you might opt to ease up your internal sales processes. So instead of, let's say, me asking you, Ozzy, can you go look at 300 files that we have internally? That would waste so much time in the business. So you'd have to set up a system whereby it would look through all this, it would flag down any issues or any duplicated data that you have internally. And also it would give you like faster results, and internally you're able to see real-time trends in your business, whether it's internally or externally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Fane. So now we'll be moving forward or further down in the conversation, and now I think because we've been able to lay a solid foundation on all of the business processes, now we're going to be talking about the tools that we can use for automating this data. And the very first question that we could ask is, what tools can I use to automate and organize my company data, right? The good thing is products like Raise exist, and that has brought us to an interesting part of the conversation where we're going to be talking about like these tools and basically how they work and why they exist. So like I mentioned, an example of this is the Raise platform. Now, with the Raise platform, you will be able to effectively organize your cap table and automate it efficiently. Basically, thinking of it as an all-in-one platform that would allow you to clean up your legal diligence, speed up your fundraising. If you're fundraising, I mean, at different points in time, you will be fundraising as a business owner, build valuations for your company, and even simplify your compliance. Remember, Lerato already spoke about that, and Soji already gave us a lot of information on compliance, and all of these things we need to take into consideration. So you'll be able to put all that data in one place, have it automated, have it clean at all times, and also be able to track this data and visualize it. But before I go deep into the conversation about why we need to do all of that, I want to tell you a bit about Raise, just basically let you understand who we are and why we're doing what we're doing, because I think it's extremely important, especially in the conversation that we're having today. So in our journey so far, actually since 2019, we've been able to help over 500 African startups to fix the problem of equity ownership. And in the process of doing this, we've been able to learn how complex it can be to serve corporate structures all across Africa. And of course, with time, as we've gained all this knowledge, we've been able to come to understand that in order for us to build a better Africa, we need to be able to share equity ownership all across the ecosystem, because it's really the key to building a better Africa. Of course, understanding how to do all of this is important. For us, we believe that we will be able to do this by leveraging on decentralized financial technologies, and we plan to make this happen using that technology. Now, An important example is, of course, using our platform. And I'm just going to be showing you what that looks like a little bit, also helping you understand how it will all work out. So in a second, you'll be seeing my screen. Okay. So now, with how far we've come so far since 2019, we've been able to put together a platform that works to make this entire process seamless. Now, what's happened is a lot of founders are struggling with being able to manage their data in one place. We've seen cases where people are using spreadsheets to manage their cap tables. They're struggling to be able to get enough finance to hire the right talent in order to manage all of this information to keep their business running, position themselves for growth, and also having to also spend a lot of money on legal fees. Of course, as first-time business owners, these are major challenges that founders encounter. And at Raise, what we've been able to do over the years that we've worked with these companies is we've been able to understand. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, I just wanted to be sure about that. Okay. So what we've been able to do over time is we've been able to understand the challenges that these founders are facing. So I've mentioned things like legal fees. I know people can relate to me in terms of this because I've been in conversations with founders where they're having to complain about this. It can be so tedious making all these payments, still having to manage your cap table using a spreadsheet where if you mistakenly delete your data, that's the end of it. And also being able to also having to hire the right talent, right? In all of this, like a lot of decision making is involved, a lot of effort is involved, a lot of money and time is involved. So what we've been able to do is we've been able to build a platform that harnesses all of these efforts in one place, basically automating it and simplifying it for you. So now with our platform, you'll be able to access an automated cap table dashboard. Basically, in simpler terms, you will be able to visualize your ownership data. You'll be able to track it. You'll be able to distribute certificates that will let you see who owns what in your company. You'll also be able to store data, as much data as possible. You also be able to plan ahead of time. Now, this is an extremely important part because what we see happening to a lot of African founders is they're in positions where they lose ownership of their company too early, right? Why did that happen? That's happening because they're not able to see what their ownership looks like years down the line. So let's say you're in 2023, you're trying to fundraise, it's your pre-seed round, and you've given a specific amount to your investor, right? If you're able to use a visualizing tool, you'll be able to know the right amount of ownership to reward investors with at every point in time. So you're not selling too much too early, you're selling just the right amount. And years down the line, you're not going to regret that decision, right? So with a platform like the Raise platform, you're basically managing your data, automating your data, saving time, saving money all in one place, right? And because we understand how important this is, we've been able to create an all-in-one tool, actually an updated tool for this. So we've recently given ourselves a new look, and with this new look comes an even better platform. We created Raise Organize, and Raise Organize is a business tool that was created to organize your business for sustainable growth. Still in the business of solving the problems for African founders, because our goal and our mission is to ensure that people are not struggling with managing cap tables themselves manually, making mistakes, selling off too much of their company. They're doing all of that in the right way. And we've been able to create two unique services that counter that problem at a very affordable rate. The first is the Equity Clinic. The Equity Clinic basically is a gap analysis on your business. So we will take a deep dive into your business, help you understand what the challenges are, and then use that information to be able to give you feedback that will help you build equity structures that will position you for growth. In addition to that, we also have valuation services, which I'm sure a lot of people already know about. Valuation services are basically collecting information on your financial history, your financial projections, your financial performance, and then giving you feedback on the value of your company. So we know that with these tools, businesses, especially African businesses, will be positioned for growth. They will no longer be managing capitals manually. There will be less error in your data. And of course, this puts you in a better position to secure rounds, structure your business for growth and scale. So now, with the way the conversation has been able to go so far, you will be able to manage your business appropriately. And at this point in time, I'm going to hand over to Kingsley because now we need to understand how to stay compliant. So while we're doing all of this, how do we stay compliant? How do we ensure that now that I've put my business in the right place, how can I ensure that I'm not making any mistakes? I'm not a defaulter. Yeah. So over to you, Kingsley.
All right. Thanks so much, Ozzy, for that beautiful tour on the Raise platform and what it is that we do at Raise. At this point now, we'll be going to our final speaker for today, in person of Emmanuel. And Emmanuel, happy to have you. So just to jump straight into it, yeah, I'll be throwing some questions majorly. And first of all, you shared with us your background and how you've moved from one fintech to the other. That's very, very interesting. I'd just like to ask you, what are the best ways to stay compliant while using e-payment services? Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Kingsley. Glad to be here once again. Okay, for the question you just asked, right? Lerato has made allusion to some of the points already when she did her presentation. She talked about having to hire the best, those experienced in compliance, right? Beyond that, right, you still need, as a startup, to first of all understand the environment, the location, the rules that governs that location or where you want to operate. You see today most fintechs would just go into a geographical location, not understanding what the rules are, or even the kind of license they would need to operate in that location, right? It's especially in Africa here, you would we have close to 200 fintechs in Nigeria today, and everybody does almost the same thing. And by the time you ask them for what kind of license do you have, you'll be amazed to know most of them are just with the basic license, the PSP license, which does not even allow them to carry out the services or products they are turning out there. So first off, you need to know what the regulation says as to the kind of products and services you need to you're going to render as a fintech or as a startup. Then basically also you need to establish can I say resilient compliance policies and procedures, right? And before you can do this, right, like Lerato has said, you would then need to have the right resource, hire the right resource, right? She made mention of the kind of people you would need, right, to come into your organization, giving you the kind of resource you have at startup. But all said and done about the procedure, right? You need to be sure of those procedures and policies, and they must be in conformity with the rules and regulation of that location or country where you're carrying out business. You cannot bring a South Africa policy or procedure here to Nigeria and expect that procedure to work or to use it to operate. It doesn't conform with the law. First off, you then need to know what the laws are, and then you then need to be able to establish those policies and procedures. Also, Fanny and Ozzy just talked about data rights and how to remove errors from data rights. To be compliant as a fintech, as a startup, right, you need to build an information security program, which must be very secured, right? It has to be secured so that your customers' details or data are protected from bad actors who may want to compromise that system, right? You have the key word here is agility, right? Yes, you have a strict information security system, but at the same time, it has to be agile in such a way that when there are need for regulatory updates, you are able to quickly adjust to that system, right? Also, you need to set up the compliance system has to also be in such a way that not only the compliance officer within the organization is aware of the policies and procedure, all the employees are. You don't, because a breach from one of the employees can lead to litigation, penalties, and fines from regulatory authorities, right? So, how do you do this? You have to go ahead and train your employees to be aware of those policies and procedures. If I take a sample check now and ask us what our organization policies and procedures are, I guess most of us may not really know, and that's not no fault of ours anyway. It's majorly the responsibility of the organization, the start of the company, to make sure that these policies and procedures are passed down to all the employees within that organization. And not just pass it down, right? You continue to train these employees from time to time on the need to be updated as to those policies, how they work, how it affects their daily activities, and also how those policies can be implemented in order to not to circumvent the organizational goal, and also to be in conformity of what the regulators have spelled out, right? Then also, right, I know most businesses, right, would work directly with third parties, vendors, merchants, and also, so you need to develop a risk management system, right, where you are able to, because if you have a watertight procedures and policies for you, your company, and your staff alone, and those people you do business with, the partners, the vendors, and other parties that engage you in your daily business activities. You don't have a well spelled out risk management system for them. The activities can bring breach to your system, and which can lead to litigation, regulatory fines, and what have you. So you need to have a system of where you have a partnership deed, MSAs, agreement contracts that will be well spelled out, understood between you and your third parties, right? And so mostly, right, for you to be compliant, first off, you need to understand the terrain where you play. Secondly, you need to employ the right resource. We've talked about equipping those resources from time to time to be able to understand the different updates or regulatory changes within that country or that corridor where you operate. Then you need to also build a very good and secured information system that would prevent bad actors from coming into the system. Really, we've done that to a large extent. I could say that compliant to a certain degree of to a certain degree.
Wow, thank you, Emmanuel. That was very, very deep insights that you've shared. I like the way you pointed out the point, syncing with what Lerato has also said, which is very, very important. Just before we go into the question and answer time, I think there's just one more question for Emmanuel. In countries where regulations are changed frequently, what measures can a business take to adjust easily, especially in the African terrain, the government can just wake up with one policy. So how would you advise businesses to adjust?
All right, thank you, Kingsley. Right, I'll just give an example of what just happened in Nigeria, the CBN cash swap that just happened, right? And you saw that most financial institution banks could not cope with when those transactions started coming in. What did they have? They had infrastructure issue, right? And their infrastructure could not contain the level of transactions that were coming in, and that was because of the fact that they were not ready for it. CBN today had the cashless policy for over 10 years, and the expectation would have been that these financial institutions, startups, would have made provision for such, right? So first, you need to be ready. You need to have the right infrastructure, right? So that when when there are changes, you're able to adapt quickly to those kind of changes, right? And also, you need to be abreast of what is happening within those industry, right? Each regulatory body would have a channel of communication where there are changes, right? Now, how do you receive those changes, right? Do you have the right people that understands and able to interpret those changes and then go ahead to implement it, right? If you don't hire the right resource, right? Maybe your chief compliance officer or your risk control officer does not really understand what those changes are. He cannot interpret it, and then you cannot interpret it to share with your organization. So first off, you need to have the right infrastructure. Secondly, you need to have the right resource to be able to get those communication from the authorities. And also, you need to also build in a system that is self-sustaining, right? What we have realized, I gave you my experience where I had to move from one company to another, right? Within the space of 6 months, I worked in 3 different companies, right? Assuming one of the companies just had just me as a compliance officer, and there are changes within the regulatory framework, what then happens? That company will be left dry and out. So you need to have a good system of continuity, right? Whereby you not just on the people you hire, right? You give them that training to be able to be aware to know what it takes to interpret each changes that happens, right? It's okay. Take Nigeria for example again, right? There are two policies that kind of change the way we onboard merchants, the kind of merchant we onboard, and how we are supposed to go ahead and bring this merchant into our system as fintechs and as startup, right? The first was before now, if you need to onboard a business, right? CBN policy then was that uh, any shareholder or director that have 25% interest, so equity, shareholding in that company, you have to carry out a due diligence on that shareholder or that director. Now, the rule changed towards the end of last year, where CBN had come to say, no, okay, 25% is not it anymore. It now becomes 5%. So if you don't have a good compliance system, right, how do you then go ahead and put a structure in place to make sure that those due diligence are carried out on those directors, right? So, and the law was you need to carry out those due diligence not just on new merchants or customers you're onboarding. You also have to carry it out on the existing merchants you have in your portfolio, right? So you needed to have a good system to be able to carry out that regulation that just came up. And what we saw with most Nigerian system was that most companies in Nigeria, most of them could not comply with that regulation, and CBN had to extend the date of compliance. Also with the BVN, right? BVN is a major form of. Sorry, I'm using the Nigeria context, right? Anyway, I know there are other people here, right? But let's streamline it to Nigeria for now. So CBN also came up with a policy last year to say that the use of BVN, right? You need to get consent before you use BVN for any type of verification you want to do. Now, most companies, most businesses, most startups in Nigeria today would collect BVN from intended customers, merchants, and what have you, and then they would then go and verify. Some would not even go and verify. CBN come up with the policies to say no, you have to get consent directly from NIPS. So when you want to onboard a merchant or an individual, you send the name to NIPS. NIPS then sends the name to sends a consent request to the individual to say this company is requesting that we give them details of your BVN. Can you then give us consent to give them back, to give them those details? And if you grant consent, good, so fine and good, right? But if you do not, nothing goes through. Now, what we found out is most companies could not integrate into that system, right? Because of the fact that they didn't have the adequate infrastructure. CBN had to, it was supposed to commence 1st of February. CBN had to extend the date to 30th of March. So you could see that the need for a good infrastructure and also to it's very paramount to having a good compliance system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for such great insights. Thank you again. I'd like to appreciate every one of our speakers, starting from Lerato down to Adesoju and down to Emmanuel. Thank you. You guys have shared very beautiful insights today. So we're going straight into question and answer time. The audience are quite excited about this session, and so there's a first question here for Lerato. So this person says, I agree with all the suggested critical hires at the initial stage, but what could be wrong if we outsourced the compliance function to a third party to save costs?
Nothing would be wrong if you outsource the compliance to a third party. In fact, unless you've got maybe a compliance person who has a wide range of experience and also has places where they can consult in case something else comes up and they've got that expertise or have got that network of expertise, actually outsourcing might be good for you because in an outsourced environment, they've got other people within that environment that can help them should something that is new comes up. Somebody else ensures that there's people who are responsible for your compliance are trained. So you don't have to be the one that worries about training them. Like I said, they've got a network of people that they can consult if something else comes up. So there could be benefits, a lot of benefits of actually outsourcing compliance, provided the most important thing is that you've got somebody who ensures your compliance. And if that person is a third party, that's I would recommend that actually.
All right. Thank you so much, Lerato, for throwing more light into
Sorry,
that.
Kingsley, I don't know if I could add to that. I was just going to ask Lerato a question because having to use third party for compliance, for me, it's always, I try to stay away from that because I know there could be litigations around it, right? And because you're looking at data breach, right? Let's say, assuming you want to onboard merchants and you let that out to a third party to carry it out for you. If peradventure, if there's a data breach, who is then liable for that?
That's actually a good question. I would think that you embed that in your SLA agreement with the third party that you get in compliance, and to make sure that for South Africa is the POPI Act actually being followed, and how do they ensure that? And then I know in Rwanda there's a Data Security Act that we have to follow. So I will make sure that all of those things are addressed in my SLA and everything else. That's how I would do it.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Manuel, for throwing that in. So Olayinka Popola he's joining from LinkedIn. He has a question for Soji. So Soji, this is for you. He says, hi Soji. If my business is in Eastern Europe or any part of the world where the popular growth rate is dropping, do I have a fundamental problem like you said, if I serve global consumers more and less of the local markets? Besides, what do you think may shift in the future that can affect this company? Soji.
Okay, Kingsley, tell me if you hear me clearly.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, I think if I heard the question correctly, the fundamental issue if you're operating in a country, if you're serving a country with a declining population, is that one day you'll be the only one there, right? Because everyone else is gone. But jokes aside, I mean, I think the dynamics you face there is that you will need to be more focused in your execution. So while the broad population may be declining, your target segment might not be declining. So there might still be scope for you to pick and choose what exactly you do there. The second thing to say is that consumer behavior also changes and evolves over time due to different external dynamics or even internal factors. So this could actually help you to create new addressable markets despite what's happening with the overall population dynamics. And the other thing to say is also that in some of these countries, yes, the population is shrinking, but people are potentially also getting wealthier. Okay, so it also means that they have more to spend. So you need to really figure out what should you be targeting in terms of the products you're selling into the marketplace, right? To really capture the profit pools that are available within that particular country. And maybe the final thing to say, which I believe you already mentioned in your question, is to expand beyond that particular country to serve either regional or global markets. Okay, and this is typically easier if you are a tech-enabled business, or if you're an export-oriented business, for example. That's another way you can sort of walk around the population dynamics that are faced within that particular country. But like I mentioned earlier on, this is less so the case in Africa because many African countries are still growing, 2, 3, 4%. So it's less so an issue. It's more an issue for certain developed markets, or even within some Eastern European countries, for example. But at the same time, population shrinkage is not always a bad thing, because that population is shrinking also means that, for example, there's more resources available for people to take advantage of, right? So the constraints around, let's say, water usage become less of an issue, right? Because population is shrinking. So there's less strain on some of the national resources that are available, right? There's also something to think about in terms of what does government do in terms of investments in a country where the population is shrinking. Do they invest more? Do they reduce investments? Right. So there's a lot more to think about, when you're faced with such dynamics. So growth is not always a good thing. It could also be a bad thing, right? So.
All right. Thank you, Adesoji, for striking that balance to the question. So there's a third question here also. It's actually a general question. Says, at what point should a new business start to pay attention to cyber threats when it is starting out? Yeah. I'll throw that to Emmanuel.
Okay, it has to be right from the inception, right? Once you're starting your business, we're in the e-payment space, right? What we do, majorly technological driven or technology driven. So we need to have, and you're aware that there are bad actors that want to hack your system right from the get go. So that's why you need to have a strong, resilient security system, right? You need to go ahead and make provisions or invest in those infrastructure that would help to keep away these bad actors from the system, right? Because it could lead to the activities could lead to grounding your business even before it takes off. Really, for me, that's why we talked about the compliance, having a good data system, and also having to invest in this infrastructure that will secure your system for you. And so, yeah, right from the beginning of the business.
Thank you.
From the inception.
Thank you so much. Adesoji, do you want to throw more light? Do you have a contrary opinion, Lerato?
No, I don't.
All right. How about Adesoji? I'd like to confirm from Adesoji. Is it at the beginning, or when you've done your seed round or your series B, or what would you?
So did you ask me a question in case I missed it?
I was just asking, are you in agreement with what Emmanuel had said in terms of cyber threats, taking it very important right from the inception of the business? Do you work with that school of thought?
I think the logical thing is, in a world where with internet you could get attacked from anywhere around the world, right? I mean, I think logically something you need to take seriously from day one. You don't want to start taking it seriously after you've gained meaningful traction, because the cost of loss is more significant at that point in time. And I think actually any serious investor would really try and gauge how, because these are risks which could come up at any point in time, frankly speaking, particularly if you're a technology or internet-enabled business. So I'll say, I believe that's what Emmanuel also said. From day one, you really need to start to take cyber threats quite seriously.
All right, thank you so much. That's another big one for us. So that's the end of the questions. Samuel Elensi from
Sorry,
LinkedIn
Kingsley,
So
Please
I
go ahead,
wanted to
please.
add on that and tie it back to what I originally said about your operational and reputation risk. Cybersecurity is important for that because from day one you take that threat. Because if you, like your customers, their data is leaked or everything, operationally you can't carry on because you're going to lose all of them, and reputational risk as well. No one is going to trust you.
Yeah, that's a big one. No one is going to trust you. Thank you, Lorato, for adding those final words. Samuel had asked if this session is being recorded. Yes, it is, and you get it at the end of the session. All right. So at this point in time, we'd like to say thank you. For as many that registered for this session today, please expect an email from us. One, the email will contain a founder's toolkit. So that's our gift from Raise to you as a founder. It's so rich. I'm very sure once you open the drive and you'll be able to access all these things for free. That's from us saying thank you for joining us today. And also, there's a feedback form. Raise is a company that we've thrived on feedback. So please make free to add those feedbacks you have, please. And they're very short questions. I would like to get your feedback on the sessions and everything. All right, at this point in time, I think that will be the end. I'd like to say thank you once again to our speakers. Thank you, Lerato, for taking our time to join us today. Thank you, Adesoji. Thank you, Emmanuel. Beautiful session we've had. On behalf of the entire Raise team, we say thank you for everyone joining on LinkedIn, on YouTube, even on StreamYard. Yes, thank you so much, everyone. And that will be it from us today. Thank you, and see you at the next one. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Take care.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you,
you.
everyone.
Have a
Thank
lovely
you,
day, everyone.
everyone.